Welcome back. You're watching the Double X Factor, and we're going to meet our woman at work this week, and that's Rama Bijapurkar. She'll have a lot to say about the report you just saw earlier on in the show. Who is she? What does she do? Well, she's an expert on consumer behavior, and her book We Are Like That Only is a bestseller. She's a much sought after management consultant and has served and serves on several boards of companies as an independent director. Rama, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You saw that report, Rama. What is the key reason you think for that really pathetic 5% number that we are seeing as women on boards of the top 100 Indian companies?
I guess the pool is not large enough. So if we have this conversation 5 years later, I think you'll see a significant difference. So, and 10 years later, hopefully we wouldn't need to have this conversation. But right now, I think it just is partly the pool of available women. So when you have a smaller pool to pick from, then you pick a smaller number. Also, the financial sector, because of the rules, you know, a lot of the women are in the financial sector, and a lot of them can't really go on a lot of boards as a result of that, because you can't lend. I mean, there are regulations about complications when you have your banker on another company's board and so on. So I think automatically that cuts out a certain proportion.
What is it that gets you invited to be on a company's board? Because everybody doesn't get invited. What is it that people look for, and how does that invitation come? Tell us how it really works.
I often joke, and maybe it's the truth, that I'm the token woman, so they can say they're gender friendly. I'm the token marketing type, so they can say they're consumer friendly. I'm the token maverick, so they can say that they are open to outspoken ideas. And as someone said, if I were physically challenged as well, I would come as a complete 4-in-1 package, and there you're done with all your diversity needs. On a more serious note, I think there is something to do with visibility as well. I guess when the nominations committee looks around, because in India, I think we haven't yet moved to formal search processes by formal search consultants. I think some boards do it, others don't. So then I guess you tend to get limited by who's visible and who's not.
So that's how companies pick people. How do you pick companies?
I believe that on all boards.
Because given how qualified you are, and the 4-in-1, not 4-in-1, the 3-in-1 qualification that you have, how would you pick companies?
I actually pick them based on, the general principle is that you have to be able to learn and contribute. So if there is no learning that's happening, then frankly a lot of it isn't really worth it. Because if you're on a board for the money that it gives you, then you are...
Which is a lot of money.
Besides the prestige. On some boards is a lot of money, on some boards isn't at all. I mean, by RBI regulations, if you're on a bank board, other than sitting fees, you make nothing. And so on then. But if you were there because of those, then you're not really independent. I think it then diminishes your ability to just get tough. It's only when you can walk away from something that you can be truly independent.
So how do you pick the companies you choose to sit on?
I pick based on areas that are of interest to me. For one thing, I would like to go on every government board. People think that's a little bit strange, a government board that makes me an offer, because I think that sometimes you have to work with the system from inside the system. There's no point complaining about it. When I was briefly on the Bharat Petroleum Board, I figured that you have to learn about energy security, so it's a good time to do it. Infosys, for example, is a board that teaches you all shades of accounting. I mean, you got to do US GAAP, you got to do Indian GAAP, you got to do IFRS. It's stressful for a non-accountant like me, but you learn. I think you also learn about outsourcing and what's happening.
So it's your interest, what you could learn, and
what it does for me in my consulting business as well. I mean, so that's my sort of non-financial payoff, that once a quarter I get educated between a bank board and a risk management company board, an insurance board and a consumer goods board.
A board meets about 4 times a year, is mandated to meet 4 times a year. And these are diverse sectors. What is it that is your job really on that board as an independent director?
Ooh, that's a troublesome question.
What does it entail?
I think what you are being asked to do is essentially ensure that the company is creating, at the least, is legally compliant, is no one stealing the family silver, accounting is what it's supposed to be. And I think at the most it is about ensuring that the company follows all possible avenues to create value and value for its shareholders.
As an independent director, you would have to be doubly careful of the companies that you pick, isn't it? We saw with the Satyam scam issue how certain independent directors were questioned, and it has damaged their reputation. So, is that something that you need to be particularly careful about? And how do you really know whether you're walking into the right place or
I think
not?
you will never know. As I've often said, planes crash after radar, planes have flown before radar, so you will never really know whether something's okay. But let's just say that if you are not sure about the management team, if you don't like the kind of auditors that there are, boards are collective entities. I think the most important, the other way I pick my board is, does it have a bunch of people that I really can learn from and that would be fun to be with. So if you don't know anybody there, if you're not sure about the credentials of people who are actually there, then I think you shouldn't be doing it. So I agree with you that you can't be too careful. But having said you can't be too careful, it's a bit like getting married, right? You'll never know until you actually do it.
There is an element of
There is an element
chance.
of risk, serious risk, yes.
How important is having women in the workforce where Indian industry is concerned, and at the top, which is at the board level?
I think the fact that you need more women and you can't just be a boys' club, I think is fairly clear to a lot of companies. Companies I consult with, companies on whose boards I am. I think the fact that it is a bit of an embarrassment to have a board without a single woman on it, I think is something that a lot of boards do recognize as well. So I think it's changed substantially from saying...
More than half of the 100 companies surveyed don't
and their
have women on
answer,
their
if you
boards.
ask them why not,
There aren't enough.
their answer is, find us the women and we'll get them on the board.
But but you also, Rama, you began this conversation saying it is partly or largely due to the fact that the pool is so limited. So where it's a chicken and egg situation.
I think we have to build the pool, or let's say that the pool is limited, but the pool is big enough to have much better ratios and numbers. So the pool is there, and the pool is further cut short by this visibility factor. So for example, they could be professors at institutes, they could be people who are sort of having a private practice of some kind. It could be someone who's working in a smaller town that you don't often get to see. It could be someone who's never ever been, doing interviews with Anuradha Sengupta. But I think there are a lot of them. So we need to search, we need to comb. So the pool, further deflated by visibility, is really why you end up with the same 2.5 people on every board. Further deflated by the fact that financial services women are not as easily employable on boards as independent directors.
Okay, so one final question before we get into a break, and that is, do women, because of their genders, actually function differently when it comes to being around a board table than the men?
Wiring is different. I mean,
So what would be different? What would be different on
wiring-
a particular decision? Higher moral standards because women play by the rules more, maybe?
Big advantage that I see, and it is the advantage of diversity as well, is that when you have a majority community that has a set of unwritten rules that have come down over time and have become enshrined as tradition, when you have an outsider who comes in and says, but why? I think that in itself, and that's really what diversity does, it's someone who sits down and says, well, why does this happen like this? Why doesn't it happen any other way? Can't we do it some other way? I think that in itself is a really big step forward. My amusing story is we were at a board once where there was a really contentious issue being discussed, and it was really contentious. You could feel the tension in the room. But most of the directors who were male, they started off by discussing rainforests, weather, golf, cricket. That was the initial discussion. Then we went into the agenda, which went, down a predictable, all the formal agenda, the statutory agenda, without getting into the elephant in the room. And I remember telling, that board actually had 2 women, and I remember telling a woman colleague of mine that, if this board were women, I said we would not probably have lasted up to that point without acknowledging the elephant in the room. We would have discussed it as soon as we entered. We'd have said, you know what, we have this elephant in the room. Can we please talk about the elephant in the room? So of course there are some differences, But I think it's the way you approach problems. It's diversity. It's percume.
Yeah, we're going to take a commercial break. We're going to come back and talk to you about the next story that we have on the show. So while I find out from Rama
So
what
I'm a 3-in-1 package here too.
exactly, and while I find out from Rama which company that was that she referred to, which wouldn't deal with the elephant in the room, you take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about advertising and some ads that actually break stereotypes when it comes to women. We'll be back in just a bit.